Oh, that's better. That's better. There we go. Isaiah. We'll open that up. I can come down to you. You don't have to come up here.
Yeah, I need prayer for where I'm staying. I can't get along with her. She argues with me when I talk about the Bible and everything.
Where are you staying?
I'm staying with my niece, Robin,
Uh-huh.
and she wants to argue all the time, and I can't stand arguing.
Right. I hear you. I hear you. Well, we'll keep you in prayer. Wow. Okay, let me put this down here where I can get to it. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's of course it's the holiday season, so we've got a number who are traveling, and so we're going to we'll have a small crowd today, but we'll make up in enthusiasm what we lack in numbers today. How's that? So let me see. I can't get that thing on. Let me turn that thing on. I thought it was working. Ah, there we go. All right. That's just a backdrop, so don't worry about it. But we're going to continue on in Isaiah today, and we're going to work into maybe a little bit of and instead of just prophecy, we'll maybe get a little bit of actual history involved in it as well, and accounts which are things that you've heard before in other accounts such as Kings and Chronicles, and so you'll see that there's a rehash of these things, but they're done for a reason, okay? Because in Chronicles and in Kings, you don't get the prophecy, and so the purpose of these historical accounts that get woven in are to put the prophecies in context. All right. So let's go ahead before we start and go to our Father in prayer. Almighty, gracious, loving Heavenly Father, all powerful, all knowing, all loving, all just. We thank you so much for the creation. We thank you so much for our existence. We thank you for every breath that we draw and every day that we see. We ask that you be with us today as we study your word and find ways to take it out to the world which so desperately needs it. We ask that the things that we study be pleasing in your sight, that they be scripturally sound, and that they strengthen our outreach capabilities. We thank you so much for the protection that you've offered us as we have traveled, our brothers and sisters as they travel out around the country, and we ask that you bring them back to us safely in accordance with your will and at the next appointed time. We ask that you be with those who are isolating due to exposure to the virus. We ask that you be with them as they follow along with our studies and that you strengthen them, that they may be able to come back and join us in person as soon as possible. We ask for comfort. We ask for comfort for those that we have lost. We ask for strength in supporting those who need that strength. We ask for healing for those who are ailing. We ask for encouragement for those who are suffering from the discouragement that may occur during this holiday season as we're being isolated. We ask that we be strengthened, that we may strengthen each other. We thank you for the doctors and the nurses and the first responders. We thank you for our military personnel wherever they are, and we ask that you be with them and protect them, and that the environment that they are in not be allowed to affect them in such a way that it detracts from their spiritual growth. We ask all these things in the name of your precious Son. Amen. We're in Isaiah. We've looked at Hezekiah and Hezekiah's challenge by Sennacherib. We looked at his message, and we looked at Isaiah's message to Hezekiah. Hezekiah prayed to God, and God answered Isaiah. And then Isaiah, is it rumbling or static? How's that? Is that better? Give it a minute or two, and I know this is a new battery in this thing, so Lord willing, I think I might have been on mute and not in the on position. So that might help right there. Okay, so and of course, there. Yeah, I didn't have it on. I had it on mute. My bad. Yeah, that's interesting. You might have been coming through the other mic. Who knows? Oh, you think? Okay. Well, that I'm afraid I won't stop leaning on the podium. Those habits die hard. But yeah. Okay, so Hezekiah, so Isaiah then receives Hezekiah's answer from God, or the answer for Hezekiah, and relays that to Hezekiah. And of course, we see that when they pray together, that the angel delivers them from Sennacherib's army, and Sennacherib limps home, and eventually Sennacherib is betrayed and murdered by his own sons. But then we look at as we come into Isaiah 37 verse 21, we're starting to get, as you get these situations, you get the promises that God makes, and the promises of delivery. And so this will be the message that Isaiah translates. We've gotten the message that Isaiah has received from God, and now we're about to read the message as Isaiah translates it to Hezekiah, so that he and the people can be reinforced by it. So let's take a look at someone start reading in verse 21 for me, please. Go ahead and read through 25.
Then Isaiah, the son of Amos, sent to Hezekiah, saying, Thus says the Lord God of Israel, because you have prayed to me against Sennacherib.
I know these words are, these old Akkadian words and everything. They're hard to pronounce sometimes. Okay, keep going.
King of Assyria, this is the word which the Lord has spoken concerning him. The virgin, the daughter of Zion, has despised you, laughed you to scorn. The daughter of Jerusalem has shaken her head behind your back. Whom have you reproached and blasphemed? Against whom have you raised your voice and lifted up your eyes on high? against the Holy One of Israel. By your servants you have reproached the Lord, and said, by the multitude of my chariots, I have come up to the height of the mountains, to the limits of Lebanon. I will cut down its tall cedars and its choice of cypress trees. I will enter its furthest height to its fruitful forest. I have dug and drunk water, and with the soles of my feet I have dried up all the brooks of defense. You do not hear long ago how I made it, from the ancient times that I formed it. Now I have brought it to pass, that you should be for crushing fortified cities into heaps of ruins. Therefore their inhabitants had little power. They were dismayed and confounded. They were as the grass of the field and the green herb, and as the grass on the housetops and the grain blighted before it is grown. But I know your dwelling place, you going out, you're coming in, and your rage against me.
Okay, so what is God saying here? This message that Isaiah is delivering to Hezekiah, and Hezekiah is going to be delivering this message then to the Assyrians through his response to Rabshakeh. Rabshakeh referred to in verse 24, where he talks about all those taunts and challenges that Rabshakeh issued to the King Hezekiah standing on the wall, and actually not just Hezekiah, but all those who were on the wall with him. Okay, and so he says, "You've reproached the Lord by saying that by my chariots I can overcome, and that we can cut down all the cedars, and boasting about how you've dug and dammed up all the waterways so that they can't get water, and cut them up." And remember that was Sennacherib's boast. He had Hezekiah penned up like a bird in a cage, if you will. And so he says, but you have not heard how I, God, have made these things happen for you. It was my plan that you should come and beset Israel and challenge Judea. That's my plan. That's not your plan. Okay? All those other people that you defeated so that you could be raised up, so that I could take you back down again. He says, I know your works. I know where you live. You can't get away from me, and I will exact that same punishment upon you at the appropriate time. And so he says, you're gonna understand. And he says, I know that you live where you live. I know that you rage against me, and that you are exceeding the mandate that I gave you. Okay? That often happens when people, even as we saw the account of the judges, many of them exceeded their mandate, and God had to set them down as well. Okay? And so we will continue on, and he says, because of that, this is what I will do. Okay? So start reading in verse 29, and go ahead and read through 34.
Because the rage against me, thy turmoil, it came up into my ears, therefore will I put my foot in thy nose, and my body in thy lips, and I will turn thee back by the way by which thou camest. And this shall be a sign unto thee: ye shall eat this year such as groweth of itself, in the second year that which springeth of the same, and in the third year sow ye, and reap, and plant vineyard, and eat the fruit thereof. And the remnant that is escaped of the house of Judah shall again take root downward, and bear fruit upward. For out of Jerusalem shall go forth remnant, and they that escape out of the Mount Zion, the zeal of the Lord of hosts shall do this. Therefore thus saith the Lord concerning the king of Assyria: he shall not come into this city, nor shoot an arrow there, nor come before it with shields, nor cast a bank against it. And by the way that he came, the same can he return, and shall not come into the city, saith the Lord.
And one more.
For I will defend this city to save it for my own sake and for my servant David's sake.
So God's message is, you're standing here, you think you're going to take this, you're camped. Remember that the main army is not right there, that there's a preliminary army that is surrounded. Now, they've got them all pinned up. They can't go anywhere, okay? They already have occupied Israel, and they've surrounded the surrounding areas of Judea, but further back, okay, some distance away is King Sennacherib and the masses of his army. All right, but God says, you're not going to come and take this hill, and He talks about the sign: you shall eat this year such as groweth of itself; the second year that which springeth the same; and the third year sow and reap and plant vineyards and eat the fruit thereof. Now this is a message that the remnant that is escaped of the house of Judah shall again take root downward and bear fruit upward. The remnant that is escaped of the house of Judah, talking of those who will get a reprieve, if you will, in the house of Judah. Remember that the house of Judah is not just Jerusalem, it's the whole countryside. Now, part of that countryside has already been taken over and oppressed, but Jerusalem itself has not. And so God is telling them, therefore, you will not take Jerusalem. I will defend and will protect it. And then the next verses, as we follow on, the last verses, verses 36 through 38, talks about what happens and how his army is thrown into disarray. And it's a short historical encapsulation of how God's prophecy and how God's answer was fulfilled against the armies of Sennacherib. So read 36 through 38, please.
For I will defend this city to save it for mine own sake, and for my servant David's sake. Then the angel of the Lord went forth and smote in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. And when they arose early in the morning, behold, they were all dead corpses. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed, and went and returned, and dwelt in Nineveh. And it came to pass, as he was worshiping in the house of Nisroch, his god, that Adrammelech
and Sharezer, his sons,
smote him with the sword, and they escaped into the land of Armenia. And
Esarhaddon, his son, reigned in his stead. So, two of his sons murdered him and fled north up into a region around the Black Sea, is where this was, okay? And so into Armenia, and then left one son, a weaker son, if you will, to rule in their stead. And of course, they never really recovered from that, in that they were overcome by Babylon eventually as a result of that. But now we look at Hezekiah. There's a chapter here in Hezekiah's sickness, and this is probably taken out of historical context. This probably occurred before the events which we have just read. So let's go ahead and talk about this. Is about Hezekiah and God basically getting Hezekiah's attention. That's what happens sometimes. You have a little bit of a religious revival when you're challenged. Heart attacks or illnesses or deaths of family members can cause you to assess things, and even though they are earth shaking in many ways, they are also attention getters that allow us to refocus our thoughts and our efforts. And so that's what we're looking at here. We're looking at Hezekiah, who was facing a wake-up call from God. All right. So let's read chapter 38. We'll go ahead and start there. Just start reading, and I will stop you when I just can't stand it anymore.
in those days was Hezekiah sick unto death. And Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos, came unto him and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Set thine house in order, for thou shalt die and not live. Then Hezekiah turned his face toward the wall and prayed unto the Lord, and said, Remember now, O Lord, I beseech thee, how I have walked before thee in truth, and with a perfect heart, and have done that which is good in thy sight. And Hezekiah wept sore. Then came the word of the Lord to Isaiah, saying, Go and say to Hezekiah, Thus saith the Lord, the God of David, thy father, I have heard thy prayer, I have seen thy tears. Behold, I will add unto thy days 15 years.
Okay, now, so I want to take a look at something here. This was 713 BC, basically, approximately, whenever this was told to him. And around 698 BC is when Hezekiah died. Remember that Isaiah was still prophesying at that time. And Manasseh took over, who was 12 years old, but under the control of a wicked mother. All right? And so we see that that Manasseh then exacts that punishment upon the prophet Isaiah eventually, and sort of closes out Isaiah's prophecy, if you will. But then we look at something I want you to note here, as we've noticed before, that Hezekiah prays to God. But God answers Isaiah. It's like God has this chain of command going on right here at this time. So he's speaking through the prophets, speaking through the priests, because the king is not acting in a manner which is sanctioned by God. And so he's basically taken out of that chain of command and basically demoted, if you will, in the scheme of things. All right. Remember that David had that same issue. As long as he was just, he was anointed. But then whenever it was time for him, whenever God had to get his attention, well, he sent Nathan in one case, Samuel in another case. And Samuel, of course, who had to set Saul down as he did. So God appointed these kings, but those kings were supposed to be subordinate to and continue to be in tune with them. But when that happens, when they fail to perform that function, then it's left up to someone else to make that happen. And so God sent the prophets, particularly when the kings and the people were not listening as they needed to, were not attentive. And so now Hezekiah has been told that you shall die and not live. And nobody ever really considers themselves, I mean, it's nice to say I'm ready to go, but really when it comes down to it, wouldn't you rather stick around a little longer? Okay, so Hezekiah's got that same thing going on. He says, I've done everything that you wanted me to do. I feel like, and Hezekiah is thinking, why, if I continue to follow you, why are you telling me that I'm going to die? Well, everybody has to die, and so Hezekiah is naturally going to think it's too soon. If I live to be 150, it's probably going to be too soon, But still, you have to live your life and that's what Hezekiah's saying. I've lived my life like I was ready to go, but has he really? Probably not, because he certainly didn't put all of his faith in God when he was facing Sennacherib and Rabshakeh. He certainly felt like he needed reinforcement, if you will. So where are we now? I will add to thee 15 years and will deliver thee in this city out of the hand of the... See, now God's going forward too. He's looking forward. He says, not only will I add to you 15 years, but I'll defend this city for you. And it's interesting to note that Hezekiah kind of must have forgotten that whenever Rabshakeh confronted him. Hezekiah kind of must have forgotten that God was going to defend him, because he certainly and they put, they dressed in sackcloth and ashes and mourned instead of saying God's going to protect us. So he must have forgotten this message. But here it is, even before it happened, God saying, you're gonna have to face the king of Assyria, and I'll deliver you out of that. All right. And so this verse 7, go ahead and someone start to read verse 7 and just keep on reading.
And this shall be a sign unto thee from the Lord, and the Lord will do this thing that he hath spoken. Behold, I will bring thee in the shadow of the degrees which is gone down to the son of Ahaz, 10 degrees backward. So the sun would turn 10 degrees, which degrees to the continent.
So God stopped, as a sign, God stopped the sun. All right? Stopped the sun from moving, arrested it. Time stood still, if you will, as a sign. 10 degrees. 10 degrees. Now, I'm not sure how long 10 degrees is, but that's 10 degrees backwards is probably an hour or so, that the sun just stopped. All right? So the writing, and so then we get to the point where what you're reading in verse 9 is basically a diary entry, verses 9 through 20. It's what Hezekiah has recorded in his prayer and his grief. And so this is like a diary entry of the king. So let's hear what the king has mused about these goings on. So I'm going to start reading for me from 9. Just continue reading. Just read 9 through 20.
This is the writing of Hezekiah, king of Judea, when he had been sick and had recovered from his illness. I said, in the prime of my life, I shall go to the gates of Sheol. I am deprived of the remainder of my years. I said, I shall not see, yea, the Lord in the land of the living. I shall observe man no more among the inhabitants of the world. My lifespan is gone, taken from me by a shepherd's tent. I have cut off my life like a weaver. He cuts me off from the loom, from the day until night. You make an end of me.
Okay, so he says in verse 10, I said, in the cutting of my days, the culling, the shortening of my life, I shall go to the gates of the grave. I'm deprived of the residue of my years. I have been robbed of my later years. He says, God's told me I'm not going to live, and I've been robbed. Okay? Well, that's interesting to say. I mean, it's up to God how long we live, right? Okay. But then he says, I shall not see the Lord, even the Lord in the land of the living. I shall behold man no more with the inhabitants of the world. Mine age is departed. I am an old man. I've become old. I've been and is removed from me as a shepherd's tent. The tent's folded up and camp is broken and you move on. And so he's looking at his life and he's going, this body is about to be full. We've heard that before, that tabernacle. Paul referred to his body as a tent, a tabernacle, and that the world itself would be folded up like an old garment, all right, and replaced. And so he says, I'm being folded up and moved off, cut off like a weaver from my life. And a pining sickness. He will cut me off with a pining sickness. Hezekiah is not sick, but God says you're going to get sick and you're going to die. So Hezekiah has basically lost hope. He's given up. All right? Thou set thine house in order, for thou shalt die and not live. Now, is that a short-term thing? Maybe that's how Hezekiah read it, but we all need to set our houses in order, don't we? We all need to plan for that day when we have to pass on. We all have to plan for that day when our preparations enable those behind us to continue to live on after we're gone. Setting your house in order is what you do. I mean, if you've got things that you want to make sure they go to the right person, you line that up ahead of time. You generate a will. If you don't want to be revived when you go into the hospital, you generate a living will, if you will, and so that you do the do not resuscitates and things like that, so that you're not on machine for an inordinate amount of time. All right, and sapping family resources for one reason or another. When you're ready to go, if you're ready to go, You line everything up that you can, spiritually and physically. And so that's what, but is God saying, set your house in order for you shall die and not live? Is he talking about setting his physical house in order at this particular time? Or is he saying you need to concentrate on your spiritual well-being? We all die. Did God say you're going to die tomorrow? And he said you shall die and not live. You can't live forever. That's the point that is being made. And Hezekiah has taken that to heart and saying, God's told me I'm going to die. Well, that's true. But now he's losing heart. And that's what he's talking about here. I've lost heart. I've lost the will to live at this particular point. And so, verse 13, continue on, please.
I have considered until morning like a lion, so he breaks all my bones. From day until night, you make an end of me.
Okay, so he's saying God, he's angry at God. He's saying, you're like a lion. You're going to chew my bones up. You've told me I'm going to die, and it's consuming me, this fear or certainty of my death. So he's blaming God. He's saying, don't fall on me like a lion and chew up my bones. Give me something better to work with. Okay, keep going.
Like a crane or a swallow, so I tattered. I mourned like a dove. My eyes fell from looking upward. O Lord, I am oppressed. Undertake for me.
Okay, undertake for me. Hold me up. I'm depressed. I'm oppressed. Hold me up. He says, I'm mourning like a crane. I'm mourning like a dove. I'm sorrowful. Everything that comes out of my mouth is a lamentation. All right. And so continue on, please. Verse 15.
What shall I say? He has both spoken to me, and he himself has done it. I shall walk carefully with all my years in the bitterness of my soul.
Well, I'm forced to look forward. He's kind of taking this the wrong way. He's feeling sorry for himself. It's pretty incredible how sorry for himself. He says that I'm going to now, okay. If you go on vacation, and the minute you go on vacation, you start worrying about and dreading coming back off of vacation and doing all those things that you have to do to catch up. Do you get to enjoy your vacation? God does not want us to be fearful of dying. He wants us to set our affairs in order, and he wants us to enjoy life to the fullest. But if we spend all of our time dreading the end of our days, isn't that going to suck the fun and the joy out of life? And so that's what's happening here. He's allowed this prognostication of death to, instead of preparing himself for it and concentrating and living each day to the fullest, he's now concentrating on the death and not concentrating on the life that will ensue before that happens. All right? So he says, he has both spoken unto me and himself hath done it. I shall go softly in all my years in the bitterness of the soul. Why? Why be bitter for something which is as certain as the sun rising and setting? Be prepared, but don't get prepared. Don't get bitter about it. All right. And so verse 16, he says basically, he's kind of turning around there a little bit now, and he says, I know I can learn from this. Just give me a chance. All right. So 16, well, that kind of sounds like the Christmas story in a way there, doesn't it? All right. So verses 16 through 22, please.
O Lord, by these things men live, and in all these things is the life of my spirit. So you will restore me and make me live. Indeed, it was for my own peace that I had great bitterness. But you have lovingly delivered my soul from the pit of corruption. For you cast all my sins behind your back. For Sheol cannot thank you. Death cannot praise you. Those who go down to the pit cannot hope for your truth.
Okay, so he's kind of caught himself here. he realizes now that he did not have, and that's the sort of the thing, you do that sometimes when you go into a state of denial. First you get angry, and then you get thoughtful, and then you go, well, I really didn't have that much right to be angry in the first place. Why get angry at the truth? All right, but that's how most people react. And you look at this response here and you think, well, this is the way a lot of people respond when they hear the gospel truth, and they have to decide that not only do they have to change their ways, but there are many who might not have had that, who should have changed their ways but didn't. All right, so there's this momentary anger and bitterness, and then the reticence and the thought and the self-examination and the realization that he still has to put his trust in God. All right. So for peace I have great bitterness, but thou hast in love to my soul delivered it from the pit of corruption. I'm feeling better now, God. I've gotten over it, and I trust you. All right. For thou hast cast all my sins behind my back. He's repented of his hard feelings, and he's getting over it. The grave cannot praise thee, death cannot celebrate thee. They that go down into the pit cannot hope for my truth. If I continue in this bitterness, it will not only rob me of the quality of life, but as a result, I will be deprived of everlasting life with God. All right? Because they know that that's what they want. They want God's protection, but if they continue to reject God, that's not going to happen. All right? So, he's now going to be thankful for the life that he has. So, someone read for me verses 19 through 22, please.
The living man, he shall praise you, as I do this day. The Father shall make known your truth to the children. The Lord was ready to save me. Therefore, we will sing my songs with stringed instruments all the days of our life in the house of the Lord. Now Isaiah had said, let him take a lump of figs and apply it as a poultice on the boil, and he shall recover. And Hezekiah had said, what is the sign that I shall go up to the house of the Lord?
So Hezekiah has asked for a sign. And I'm thinking that sign is verse goes back to verse 8. It loops back to verse 8. You've got the writing and the recording here that came after the fact. And he says, also had said, what is the sign that I shall go up to the house of the Lord? And if you jump back to verse 8, the answer to that sign is, I will bring again the shadow of degrees, which has gone down, and the sundial of Ahaz 10 degrees backwards. So the sun returned 10 degrees, by which degrees it was gone down. So God turned back time as a sign to Hezekiah that he would answer that prayer. And so Isaiah has given him, I guess he had some sort of a boil or something that was causing him a problem. Whether or not that was going to be maybe, who knows, a cancer, a canker, or a cancer, and somehow God has now solved that problem for him, healed him, if you will. But one way or another, Isaiah has prescribed a poultice, and that poultice is that by God's divine inspiration, Isaiah says this poultice will do it. Now, is it miraculous? Well, we don't know. Is it just good medicine? We don't know that either. But because we don't know the nature, you're never really told the nature of the specific malady that afflicts Hezekiah. But we do know that Hezekiah got better. Okay? And it's interesting to note that Hezekiah not only got better, but he also got forgetful. Remember that he had to pray to God to deliver him from the Assyrians. But kings have to be smart. What you're going to see here in this next passage is a man who's overconfident and betrays the trust of his people. All right? So let's read chapter 39. Someone
At
can.
that time,
Merodach Baladan.
the son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present to Hezekiah, for he had heard that he had been sick and was recovered. And Hezekiah was glad of them and showed them the house of his precious things, the silver and gold and the spices and the precious ointment, and all the house of his armor, and all that was found in his treasures. There was nothing in his house, nor in all his dominion, that Hezekiah showed them not.
Okay, so now you've got this kingdom which has been beset by Assyria, and pretty much the whole countryside has been stripped. The city alone has been saved. And King Hezekiah receives a messenger with good information about how, with good wishes for his happy recovery. And what does he do? He shows Babylon all the treasures of his treasury. Showing off. But Babylon is a mighty kingdom. Babylon is about to take Assyria. And do you think it's a good idea if somebody's that much stronger than you to lay out all of your, wouldn't you want to kind of keep things in a safe, so to speak? Wouldn't you want to do you want to advertise to the world the things that you have? Is that something that we do as a matter of security? Do we let the world know about everything that we've got? Is he showing off here? And is this really that wise in the face of someone who has the strength and the power to take what they want at will? So he may well have been overconfident, shall we say, in God's protection at that point. All right? So then, somebody's got to bring him to his senses and show him that he's made a mistake. And that's Isaiah's job. Let's go ahead and continue in verse 3, please.
Hezekiah and said unto him, What said these men? And from whence came they unto thee? And Hezekiah said, They are come from a far country unto me, even from Babylon. Then said he, What have they seen in thine house? And Hezekiah answered, All that is in mine house have they seen. There is nothing among my treasures that I have not showed them. So
there he is. Hezekiah is he's bragging to Isaiah now. I've showed him everything. Is that a good idea? Let's see what Isaiah has to say.
Then said Isaiah to Hezekiah, Hear the word of the Lord of hosts. Behold, the day come that all that is in thine house, and that which thy fathers have laid up in store until this day, shall be carried to Babylon. Nothing shall be left, said the Lord. And of thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon.
And so, who's he referring to here? All thy sons, all thy royalty shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, okay? Azariah, Azrael, and I can't remember the other, but we're talking about those who would be taken, who would be made eunuchs and pressed into service in the court of the king of Babylon. So he says, you're going to lose it all, and you will serve these men now, okay? And then Hezekiah responding in verse 8.
Good is the word of the Lord which thou hast spoken. He said, moreover, for there shall be peace and truth in my days.
Okay, well, now that's an interesting point of denial. There shall be peace in my days. He's saying that's not going to happen to me. He's basically telling Isaiah, I'm not sure I believe this. Okay? But he says, God's word is good, but this isn't going to happen to me. Okay? We do that too. You know, we see that a lot, you know. that's not what God certainly doesn't mean that. God's not talking about that. He's talking about something else. All right. So there shall be peace and truth in my days. And that's one of the things that we were told when we cry peace and prosperity, then suddenly it's all taken away from us. The pride goeth before the fall. And Hezekiah is a prideful man right now. And he's going to find out the hard way that he's not that he can't just rely on God to protect him and not respond and do the things that God wants him to do. Okay? There's a point in time where you have to respond. All right, now, so that's this is chapter 40. We will take up chapter 40 next Sunday morning, whenever when we look at Isaiah once more prophesying of the coming, of not just the coming punishment, but again looking for their deliverance, but also looking downwind. Again, you look at these patterns and you look at the way that they are being set upon, the things that they have earned and suffering their comeuppance. And yet in the midst of that, you look at the deliverance, the deliverance of a select few to be returned back to the kingdom. And you look at the model, the type of Christianity there and the salvation of the Lord. So when you look at these things, always be thinking about the patterns that are being repeated and how these things apply, how they can be compared to the coming of Christ and the onset of Christianity. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes as well. Are there any questions or comments that people need to make? If not, let's take a break and we'll be back at the top of the hour for our regular service. And thank you for your attention. Thank you for your participation in the reading. And look forward to chapter 40 next Sunday. Thank you.